The great crystal dome of the Galactic Council chamber sparkled with light from 1,000 distant stars. Hundreds of alien beings filled the curved seats, their strange forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. Some had scales that gleamed like metal, others had skin that changed colors with their emotions, and a few floated in special tanks filled with glowing liquid. At the center of the chamber stood a tall figure with gray scales and yellow eyes that seemed very old and tired. This was Ambassador Veldar from the Vorthak Empire. His hands shook as he gripped the speaking platform, and his voice carried across the silent chamber like a warning bell. "Listen to me, all of you," Veldar said, his words clear but filled with fear. "You are about to make the same terrible mistake my people made 300 years ago. You think the humans are weak. You think they are easy to defeat. You are wrong." A creature that looked like a giant insect with blue armor clicked its sharp mouth parts together. This was General Crixon from the Zephyrian Hegemony, one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. "Your empire fell because you were not strong enough, old Vorthak. These humans barely know how to travel between stars. They have no real weapons, no real armies." Veldar closed his yellow eyes for a moment, and when he opened them again, they seemed to hold the weight of terrible memories. "That is exactly what we thought. We believed we were so much better than them. Our ships were faster, our weapons stronger, our technology thousands of years ahead of theirs." The chamber filled with quiet whispers as the different alien species talked among themselves. Many of them had heard stories about the Vorthak Empire. Once, they had been one of the greatest powers in the galaxy, ruling over hundreds of worlds. Now they lived on just a few planets at the very edge of known space, hiding like frightened children. "We attacked their colonies first," Veldar continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "We destroyed their mining stations, took their people as slaves, burned their cities from space. We thought they would surrender quickly, like so many other species had done before them." High Chancellor Mordek, a being that looked like a tree made of living metal, raised one of his branch-like arms. "But surely they did surrender, Ambassador. No primitive species can stand against advanced military technology." "No," Veldar said, and the single word seemed to echo in the vast chamber. "They did not surrender. Instead, they did something no other species in the galaxy has ever done. They followed us." The whispers in the chamber stopped. Every eye, whether round, square, or completely alien, focused on the old Vorthak ambassador. "At first, we laughed," Veldar said. "Their ships were so slow, so weak. When they finally caught up to our fleets, we destroyed them easily. But then something strange happened. The next group of human ships was better. They had learned from watching the first battle. They had new weapons, new shields, new tactics." A delegate that looked like a floating jellyfish with sparkling tentacles spoke in a voice like singing crystal. "Surely you could stay ahead of them. Your technology was superior." "That is what we thought too," Veldar replied. "But humans do something that no other species does. They remember everything. Every battle, every weapon, every tactic we used against them. They studied the pieces of our destroyed ships. They captured our weapons and made them better. They learned our language, our customs, our ways of thinking." The chamber was now completely silent. Even the soft humming of the air systems seemed loud in the quiet. "They chased us across 17 star systems," Veldar continued. "Every time we thought we had escaped, they appeared again. Every time we changed our tactics, they changed theirs faster. They turned our own weapons against us. They used our own strategies, but made them better. They became better at being Vorthak than we were." General Crixon's mandibles clicked with annoyance. "This is impossible. No species can advance that quickly." "Humans can," Veldar said simply. "Because they do not just fight to win. They fight to make sure the fight never happens again. They hunt their enemies not just to defeat them, but to study them, to understand them completely, and to make sure those enemies can never hurt anyone ever again." The old ambassador's voice dropped to almost a whisper, but somehow everyone in the chamber could hear him clearly. "When we finally surrendered, we were not even fighting Vorthak anymore. We were fighting humans who had become better Vorthak than we ever were. They knew our history, our weaknesses, our fears. They knew us better than we knew ourselves." High Chancellor Mordek's metallic branches rustled like leaves in a wind. "But Ambassador, surely this was long ago. These humans today are different." "No," Veldar said, and his yellow eyes seemed to glow within a fire. "That is what you do not understand. Humans do not forget. They pass their knowledge from generation to generation like a sacred trust. The humans alive today remember every detail of our war. They remember every Vorthak name, every ship, every battle. They have been preparing for 300 years. The chamber erupted in worried voices as the different species discussed what they had heard. Some believed the old ambassador, but many others thought he was just a frightened old being from a defeated empire. General Crixon stood up, his blue armor gleaming under the chamber lights. I call for a vote. The Zephyrian hegemony requests permission to claim the human star systems for the good of the Galactic Council. High Chancellor Mordek looked around the chamber. All in favor of authorizing the Zephyrian expansion into human space. Hundreds of arms, tentacles, claws, and other strange appendages rose into the air. The vote was clear. Motion approved, the Chancellor announced. Velvar remained standing at his platform as the other delegates celebrated around him. In the ancient language of his people, he whispered a prayer for the dead, because he knew that very soon, there would be many dead indeed. As the chamber emptied and the various species left to plan their new expansion into human territory, Velvar stayed behind, staring up at the stars visible through the crystal dome. Somewhere out there, the humans were waiting. And when they came, they would remember everything. Admiral Zethrock stood on the command bridge of his massive warship, watching the tactical display with great satisfaction. 3 small dots of light flickered and then disappeared from the screen. 3 human colonies had just been destroyed in less than an hour. Report, the Admiral commanded, his blue-scaled face showing no emotion. Captain RYX Dal stepped forward, his mandibles clicking with excitement. All 3 targets eliminated, sir. New Geneva Colony, 4,700 humans. Port Wellington, 8,200 humans. Armstrong Station, 31,000 humans. Total enemy casualties, approximately 40,000. The bridge crew of the Zephyrian warship celebrated quietly. They had expected this mission to be difficult, but the humans had barely fought back. Their defensive weapons were weak, their ships slow, and their military tactics hundreds of years behind Zephyrian technology. Their planetary shields failed within minutes, reported the weapons officer. Their fighter ships were destroyed before they could even reach our fleet. Sir, this was easier than our training exercises. Admiral Zethrock allowed himself a small smile. The Galactic Council had been right to authorize this expansion. These humans were nothing more than primitive creatures playing with toys they did not understand. Send the surrender demand to their home planet, the Admiral ordered. Standard terms, immediate surrender of all military forces, payment of tribute equal to 50% of their planet's yearly production, and acceptance of Zephyrian rule over all human territory. The communication officer began transmitting the message toward the human home world called Earth. It would take several hours for the signal to reach them, and several more hours for their response to return. Admiral Zethrock expected the humans to accept defeat quickly, as most species did when faced with overwhelming force. While they waited, Zethrock reviewed the battle recordings. The human colonies had been completely unprepared for attack. Their warning systems had detected the Zephyrian fleet too late, their weapons had been too weak to penetrate Zephyrian shields, and their evacuation procedures had been slow and disorganized. Deploy the occupation forces, the Admiral commanded. I want military bases established on all 3 worlds within the next cycle. Any surviving humans are to be processed for labor assignment. Hours passed as Zephyrian ground forces landed on the destroyed colonies. The soldiers reported finding small groups of human survivors hiding in underground shelters. These survivors were captured and prepared for transport to work camps on other Zephyrian worlds. Finally, the communication officer announced that a response had arrived from Earth. The entire bridge crew gathered around to hear what they expected would be the human surrender message. The message was very short. A human voice, speaking in heavily accented but understandable galactic standard, said, "This is Admiral James Harrison of the Terran Defense Command. You have made a grave mistake. We remember every name, every face, every world. We are coming." The bridge fell silent for a moment, then erupted in laughter. Even Admiral Zethrock could not help but click his mandibles in amusement. James Harrison. The Admiral repeated the name with obvious mockery. They named their military leaders like merchants in a marketplace. And did you hear his accent? He can barely speak proper galactic standard. Captain RYX Dal wiped tears of laughter from his compound eyes. Sir, he said we are coming like he plans to attack us. With what? Those slow cargo ships they use for star travel. The laughter continued throughout the bridge crew. The idea of humans attacking the mighty Zephyrian fleet was so ridiculous that some officers had trouble breathing. What should we send back, Admiral? Asked the communication officer. Nothing, Zethrock replied. Let them waste time sending empty threats. Continue with the occupation. I want permanent bases on those worlds within 10 cycles. The Zephyrian occupation proceeded exactly as planned. Military bases were constructed on the 3 conquered worlds. The few thousand human survivors were sent to work camps. Reports flowed back to the fleet showing successful pacification of the territories. But something strange was happening that the Zephyrians did not notice. Earth was not sending the usual messages that defeated species sent: requests for mercy, offers to negotiate, pleas for the return of their people. Instead, they were sending data. Deep in Earth's military command center, Admiral James Harrison stood before a wall covered with information about the Zephyrian fleet. Every ship, every weapon, every officer had been identified and catalogued. Human engineers were already studying pieces of debris from the battle, learning how Zephyrian technology worked. Status report, Harrison said to Colonel Rebecca Thompson, his chief intelligence officer. We have complete technical specifications on their shield generators, plasma cannons, and faster-than-light drives, Thompson reported. Engineering teams are already building test versions. We should have working prototypes within 6 months. Harrison nodded slowly. And their military structure? Fully mapped, sir. We know the name, rank, and service history of every officer in their fleet. We have psychological profiles on their command staff. We know their tactical preferences, their supply routes, and their communication codes. Good, Harrison said quietly. Make sure everything is recorded. When we find them, I want to know what they had for breakfast. On the tactical display, Harrison watched the positions of every Zephyrian ship. They thought they were safe, floating in space near the conquered human worlds, celebrating their easy victory. Sir, Thompson asked carefully, the other colonies have been asking when we will respond to the attack. Harrison's expression did not change. Tell them we are preparing. The Zephyrians think this is over. They think they have won a war. They are wrong. They have started a hunt. And humans never give up a hunt. Meanwhile, on the Zephyrian command ship, Admiral Zethrock received reports that everything was proceeding normally. The human territories were secure, the occupation forces were well established, and there had been no sign of human military activity. Excellent work, the Admiral told his staff. It seems Admiral James Harrison was all talk and no action. Perhaps we should consider expanding into the next human system. None of them noticed that human ships had begun appearing at the very edges of sensor range, watching, learning, and preparing for something the Zephyrians could not imagine. 6 months had passed since the attack on the human colonies, and Admiral Zethrock was beginning to feel something he had never experienced before in his long military career: fear. The latest casualty report lay on his command table like a curse, showing losses that made no sense. How many ships this time? He asked his intelligence officer, Captain Vextar, who had dark circles under his compound eyes from lack of sleep. 15 supply ships, Admiral, Vextar reported, his voice shaking slightly. 4 patrol frigates. 3 listening posts. All gone without sending any distress signals. We found no wreckage, no bodies, no trace that they ever existed. Zethrock stared at the report, trying to understand what was happening to his fleet. The missing ships had been scattered across different star systems, following different routes, carrying different cargo. There was no pattern that made military sense. What about the security recordings from Outpost Delta 9? The Admiral asked. Vextar's mandibles clicked nervously. Sir, you should see this yourself. The main display screen flickered to life, showing the interior of a Zephyrian military outpost. Everything looked normal at first: soldiers at their posts, officers reviewing reports, technicians monitoring equipment. Then something changed. The soldiers began acting strangely. They turned their weapons on each other without warning, fighting with desperate fury. But what made the recording truly terrifying was the sound coming from the communication system. A human voice, speaking perfect Zephyrian, was broadcasting the same message over and over: New Geneva remembers 4,700 names. Port Wellington remembers 8,000 names. Armstrong Station remembers 31,000 names. The recording ended with the outpost going dark, all personnel dead by their own hands. The final image showed words carved into a metal wall: We never forget. We never forgive. We are coming. Admiral Zethrock felt his blood turn cold. How did humans infiltrate a secure military outpost? How do they speak our language so perfectly? We don't know, sir, Vextar admitted. But there's more. Long-range sensors have detected human ships at the edge of the Kepler system. The tactical display changed to show sensor readings of approaching vessels. What Zethrock saw made his worst fears come true. The ships were definitely human in design, but they were equipped with Zephyrian technology, shield generators, plasma weapons, faster-than-light engines. "This is impossible," Zethrock whispered. "Our technology is centuries ahead of theirs. How did they reverse-engineer our systems so quickly?" Captain Ryxdal entered the bridge carrying more disturbing reports. "Admiral, intelligence has been analyzing the human ships. They haven't just copied our technology, they've improved it. Their shields are stronger than ours. Their weapons are more accurate. Their ships are faster." The bridge crew fell silent. The idea that humans could not only match Zephyrian technology but actually make it better was beyond their understanding. "There's something else, sir," Ryxdal continued reluctantly. "We intercepted human communications. They have complete files on every officer in our fleet. They know our names, our service records, our family histories. They know our tactical procedures better than some of our own junior officers." Admiral Zethrock slumped in his command chair. The humans were not fighting like any species he had encountered before. This was not a war, it was something much more frightening. The humans were hunting them. Light years away, aboard the human vessel Retribution, Commander Michael Davis studied the holographic display showing Zephyrian fleet positions. His ship was a perfect blend of human engineering and captured alien technology, designed specifically to hunt Zephyrian vessels. "Target analysis complete, Commander," reported Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell from the tactical station. "We have psychological profiles on Admiral Zethrock and his entire command staff. The stress analysis shows they're beginning to crack under the psychological pressure." Commander Davis nodded with satisfaction. The Retribution was not just a warship, it was a weapon designed to wage psychological warfare. Every human ship in the fleet had been equipped with technology that could hack Zephyrian communications, infiltrate their computer systems, and turn their own equipment against them. "What's the status of the infiltration program?" Davis asked. "Proceeding ahead of schedule, sir," Mitchell replied. "We have agents placed in 7 Zephyrian supply depots, 3 communication stations, and 12 patrol routes. They don't know we can disguise ourselves as their species using their own holographic technology." The human infiltration program was perhaps the most terrifying aspect of their campaign. Using captured Zephyrian equipment and detailed biological studies, human agents could appear to be Zephyrian soldiers. They moved freely through enemy territory, gathering intelligence and sabotaging operations from within. "The Psychological Warfare Division reports excellent results," continued another officer. "Zephyrian soldiers are beginning to distrust each other. They are seeing human agents everywhere, even when there are none. Their own paranoia is destroying their unit cohesion." Commander Davis allowed himself a small smile. "Good. Fear is our greatest weapon now. They need to understand that they are not fighting a conventional war. They awaken something they don't understand." Back on the Zephyrian command ship, Admiral Zethrock was receiving even more disturbing reports. 3 more outposts had gone silent. Supply convoys were refusing to travel certain routes. Some ships had simply deserted their posts and fled to distant star systems. "Admiral," Vextar approached carefully, "the crew is asking questions. They want to know how humans learn to speak our language so perfectly, how they know our military codes, how they can appear and disappear without being detected." Zethrock stood up slowly, feeling much older than he had 6 months ago. "Tell the crew the truth, Captain. We are not fighting humans anymore. We are being hunted by creatures who have become better at being Zephyrian than we are." The bridge crew stared at their admiral in shock. The idea was impossible to accept, but the evidence was overwhelming. "They have studied us completely," Zethrock continued. "They know our weaknesses, our fears, our tactics. They have turned our own technology against us. And worst of all, they remember everything we did to their colonies. Every name, every death, every destroyed building. They will never stop hunting us until they have justice for every single human we killed." In the distance, more human ships appeared on the sensors, closing in like patient predators who had all the time in the galaxy to complete their hunt. 2 years had passed since the first human colony was destroyed, and the mighty Zephyrian hegemony was falling apart like a house built on sand. Admiral Zethrock stood in what remained of his command center, surrounded by broken equipment and frightened officers. Half of his fleet was gone, and the other half was scattered across the galaxy, running from an enemy they could no longer understand. "Status report," he commanded, though his voice had lost all the confidence it once carried. General Crixon, the same proud warrior who had once laughed at Ambassador Velvar's warnings, was now a shadow of his former self. His blue armor was dented and dirty, his compound eyes dim with exhaustion. The humans have taken the entire Zeta Quadrant, Admiral. 17 military installations, 32 industrial worlds, and 48 colonies. But sir, they're not just conquering our territory. Zethrock waited for the rest of the report, though he feared what he would hear. They are systematically destroying our ability to make war, Crixon continued. They don't just defeat our fleets, they capture our ships, study them completely, then turn them against us. They're not interested in ruling our worlds. They want to make sure we can never attack anyone ever again. The Admiral walked to the large viewing window and stared out at space. Where once there had been hundreds of Zephyrian ships, now only a few dozen remained. The humans had not destroyed most of them, they had captured them and converted them into human vessels, operated by human crews who somehow knew Zephyrian technology better than the beings who had created it. How many of our people have they killed? Zethrock asked quietly. That's the strangest part, sir, replied another officer, Captain Mexdow. They've killed very few Zephyrians. Most of our casualties come from ships that chose to fight to the death rather than surrender. When our forces surrender, the humans treat prisoners well. They even provide medical care and adequate food. This confused Zethrock more than anything else. Then what do they want? The answer came from an unexpected source. The main communication screen flickered to life, showing the face of a human male in a clean military uniform. Admiral Zethrock recognized him immediately. This was James Harrison, the human officer whose threats they had laughed at 2 years ago. Admiral Zethrock, Harrison spoke in perfect Zephyrian, his accent now flawless. I am Admiral James Harrison of the Terran Defense Command. I believe you remember our last conversation. Zethrock's mandibles clicked involuntarily. The human who had once struggled with basic galactic standard now spoke Zephyrian better than many native speakers. What do you want, Harrison? Justice, Harrison replied simply. 2 years ago, your forces killed 40,317 human civilians. We have their names, their faces, their stories. Each one was someone's child, parent, or friend. We want to make sure nothing like that ever happens again. Behind Harrison, Zethrock could see what appeared to be a vast archive, thousands of holographic displays showing information about every Zephyrian ship, every officer, every military installation. The humans had catalogued the entire Zephyrian military structure down to the smallest detail. We know everything about your empire, Harrison continued calmly. We know the name of every soldier who participated in the attack on our colonies. We know their families, their home worlds, their service records. We know your supply routes, your manufacturing capabilities, your population centers. General Crixon stepped forward, his voice shaking with fear. What are you going to do with that information? Harrison's expression remained neutral. We're going to ensure that the Zephyrian hegemony can never again launch unprovoked attacks on peaceful worlds. Your military shipyards will be dismantled. Your weapons manufacturing will be converted to civilian use. Your military leadership will face trial for war crimes. And our people? Zethrock asked. Your civilians will be unharmed, Harrison assured him. We have no quarrel with ordinary Zephyrians. Our issue is with those who chose to make war on innocents. However, your empire's capacity for military aggression will be permanently eliminated. The transmission continued for another hour as Harrison outlined exactly what would happen to every aspect of Zephyrian society. The humans had prepared for this moment with the same methodical thoroughness they had shown in hunting the Zephyrian fleet. They knew which officials were responsible for military decisions, which facilities produced weapons, which ships had participated in the original attack. What terrified Zethrock most was the realization that this conversation was not a negotiation. It was simply a notification of what was going to happen. The humans had already won completely, and they were being polite enough to explain their intentions. How did you learn so much about us? Zethrock finally asked. Harrison's slight smile was neither cruel nor kind, it was simply final. We studied you, Admiral. For 2 years, we have done nothing but learn everything about your species, your culture, your technology, and your military. We know Zephyrian history better than most Zephyrian historians. We understand your psychology, your fears, your weaknesses. But why? Crixon demanded. Why go to such lengths for revenge? This is not revenge, Harrison corrected. This is justice. And it's insurance. We want to make sure that no other species ever makes the same mistake you made. When other civilizations see what happened to the Zephyrian hegemony, they will understand that attacking human worlds brings consequences that last for generations. The transmission ended, leaving the Zephyrian officers in stunned silence. They had started what they thought was a simple conquest, but they had awakened something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. Outside the viewing windows, human ships moved into position around the few remaining Zephyrian vessels. There would be no final battle, no glorious last stand. The war was over, and the humans had won not through superior firepower, but through superior patience, planning, and absolute determination. Admiral Zethrock finally understood what Ambassador Veldar had tried to warn the Galactic Council about. Humans didn't just fight wars, they perfected them. They turned warfare into a science, and they never stopped until justice was complete. The reckoning had come, and it was more thorough and terrifying than anyone could have imagined. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called with unusual urgency. Representatives from hundreds of worlds filled the crystal chamber, but the atmosphere was completely different from the confident gathering that had authorized the Zephyrian attack on human space 3 years earlier. Now, fear hung in the air like a thick fog. Ambassador Veldar of the Vorthak Empire sat in his usual place, watching the proceedings with grim satisfaction. His yellow eyes reflected no joy, only the tired wisdom of someone who had tried to prevent a terrible mistake. Around him, delegates whispered nervously about the human fleets that had appeared at the borders of 17 different star systems. The human ships did not attack. They simply waited, hanging in space like patient hunters, their intentions unknown but their presence unmistakable. Every delegate in the chamber knew that these were not the primitive vessels the humans had possessed 3 years ago. These were ships that had proven capable of dismantling the most powerful military force in the galaxy. High Chancellor Mordek called for order, his metallic branches trembling slightly. The emergency session will come to order. We are here to discuss the situation, with the human fleets currently positioned near our member worlds. The chamber fell silent as the main doors opened. A small group of humans entered, led by a woman in formal diplomatic clothing. She was tall and walked with quiet confidence, carrying herself like someone who represented not just a government, but a force of nature that had already proven itself beyond question. This was Ambassador Helen Carter of the Terran Federation. As she approached the central speaking platform, every eye in the chamber followed her movement. She looked calm, even friendly, but there was something in her expression that made even the most powerful beings in the galaxy feel small. Honorable delegates, she began, speaking in perfect galactic standard with no trace of the accent that had once marked human speech as primitive. I am Ambassador Helen Carter, representing the Terran Federation. We come to you today not as conquerors, but as neighbors seeking understanding. General Crixon, representing what remained of the Zephyrian government, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His once proud armor was plain and undecorated now, marking his reduced status in the galaxy. We offer to all civilizations in this chamber the same thing we have always wanted, Carter continued. Peaceful trade, technological exchange, cultural cooperation, and mutual respect. The Terran Federation seeks no empire, claims no right to rule over other species, and desires only to live in peace. A delegate that resembled a floating crystal spoke in a voice like wind chimes. Then why do your fleets surround our worlds? Why do you come to us with weapons drawn? Carter's smile was patient, like a teacher explaining something to children. Our fleets are not drawn up for attack. They are present to ensure that the terms of our offer are clearly understood. You see, we have learned something important over the past 3 years. Peace must be protected. Good intentions must be backed by the ability to defend them. She activated a holographic display that showed a comprehensive treaty document. The text was available in dozens of languages, translated perfectly into each species' native tongue. This is the Terran Peace Accord, Carter explained. Any civilization that signs this agreement will enjoy our full friendship, protection, and cooperation. We will share technology, defend each other against threats, and work together for the benefit of all our peoples. The delegates leaned forward, studying the terms of the treaty. Most of it was standard diplomatic language about trade agreements and cultural exchange. But buried in the middle was a clause that made several beings gasp in shock. Article 15, Carter read aloud, states that any unprovoked attack on human worlds, any attempt at conquest or subjugation of human civilians, or any act of aggression against the Terran Federation will result in proportional and persistent response until satisfaction is achieved. The phrase persistent response sent chills through every delegate who had heard the reports from Zephyrian space. They all knew what it meant when humans promised persistent response. A delegate from the Crystalline Confederation asked the question that everyone was thinking. And what does satisfaction mean in human terms? Carter's expression remained pleasant, but her eyes became hard as diamond. Satisfaction means that the aggressing party loses the permanent ability to threaten peaceful worlds. It means that their military infrastructure is dismantled, their weapons are confiscated, and their leadership faces justice for war crimes. It means that they never again pose a threat to innocent beings. The chamber erupted in worried conversations as the different species discussed what they had heard. Some delegates argued that the terms were too harsh, while others pointed out that the humans were offering genuine friendship to those who chose peace. "What guarantees do we have that you will honor these terms?" asked a delegate whose species looked like living smoke. "You have our word," Carter replied simply. "And you have our history. In 3 years of conflict with the Zephyrian hegemony, we harmed no civilians, destroyed no non-military targets, and treated all prisoners with dignity and respect. We fought only those who chose to fight us, and we stopped fighting the moment they surrendered." Ambassador Velvar finally stood up, his old bones creaking audibly. "I wish to address the chamber," he said in his tired voice. High Chancellor Mordek nodded permission, and Velvar walked slowly to the center of the chamber. 3 years ago, I stood in this same place and warned you about humans," he said. "I told you that they were different from other species. I told you that they never forget, never forgive unprovoked attacks, and never stop hunting until justice is served. You did not listen." He turned to look directly at Ambassador Carter. "I have watched your species for over 300 years. You are indeed dangerous, dangerous to those who would harm innocents. But you are also the most trustworthy allies any species could hope for." Velvar's yellow eyes swept across the chamber. "I recommend that every civilization in this chamber sign the Terran Peace Accord immediately. Not because we fear human weapons, but because we can trust human friendship." One by one, the delegates began signing the treaty. The Crystalline Confederation signed first, followed quickly by the plasma beings of Vega 7. Even General Crixon, representing the defeated Zephyrian remnant, added his signature to the document. As the session ended, Carter approached Velvar's delegation area. "Ambassador," she said quietly, "thank you for trying to warn them 3 years ago." Velvar looked into her eyes and saw the same relentless quality that had haunted his people's nightmares for centuries, the gaze of beings who had learned to turn justice into an art form. "You're welcome," he replied. "Though I think they finally understand now." Carter nodded, her expression neither cruel nor kind, simply final. "The galaxy is safer now. And that was always our only goal."